2025 has been a pretty big year for Hypixel Skyblock. There's been a lot of new content additions added over the past 12 months, and I wanted to take a little bit of time to go over many of these additions and talk about how big they were and how relevant they were for the average player, going in a list in order from smallest to largest. This is mainly so new players can catch up or returning players can understand more about what's been added over the past year, and even if you're someone who currently does play Skyblock, it will give you some additional info on many of these updates. Before we begin though, I just want to say please make sure to like and subscribe down below as it really helps out the channel a lot, and use code RAIL on the Hypixel store for 5% off your order. It is the best way to support the channel. It really does help me out a lot, so thank you so much. Without any further ado though, let's get into this. I wanted to start off here with a pretty big one, but this isn't specifically in the top 10 biggest updates of the year. This is kind of an honorable mention. It's actually related to corrupted fragments. Corrupted fragments were lowered in terms of their price to NPC sell from 20 coins down to 1 coin, which has effectively made them a lot less useful in terms of getting money from minions. The main reason is because the admins didn't want the minions to be super powerful for money making, so this was the best way to nerf them, and it is a pretty major nerf. The amount of money generated into the economy over the past year is way lower than in previous years, and that is mostly due to corrupted fragments being significantly nerfed. Another honorable mention update that I wanted to bring up here is the mob types update, which you can access in the Spider's Den over at Ike. Basically, this is a system of sorting for every single mob in the game, sorting them all into a bunch of categories that allow players to more easily access information about all of them. Notably, many of the enchantments have also been tuned specifically for mob types. So, for example, Smite works on skeletal mobs. You're able to see all of this information in the bestiary, which is very nice to see. Makes it a lot easier for players to determine which mobs they are fighting. So the 10th biggest update this year in my view is definitely the chapters and pet crafting update. If you take a look at pretty much any pet in the game, they have been significantly changed around in terms of their recipe, and instead of how a lot of pets used to work where you would get either an epic or a legendary one depending on how much pet luck you have, now you craft pretty much all of them at common tier and you just upgrade them over time. This also includes a significant reduction in the amount of materials you need in order to make any given pet, as well as some new additions in terms of the actual rarities. Now there are some more, common rarity pets. This is something to try to make the game a little bit more friendly to newer players, get people more access to pets in the early and mid game. There's also the chapters section of the update, which is a new feature included as part of new islands. Basically how this works is that whenever you go to a new island, there will be chapters there, and these are basically little activities you can do to get you used to the content and give you some nice rewards. And the rewards actually scale up pretty significantly. Towards the end, you can actually get some really nice buffs here. As you can see, 20,000 Heart of the Forest XP, which is part of the foraging update, which we'll go into later, is actually fairly significant, and quite a bit foraging and hunting experience as well. So things like this are likely to continue to be added over the coming weeks, months, and years. There is a whole section for chapters within the quest and chapters part of the Skyblock menu, so they are definitely going to focus on adding more of these over time. In my view, the 9th biggest update this year was actually the experimentation table RNG meter update. This occurred in January, and it was pretty notable because it included a bunch of stuff related to the RNG meter in general, notably allowing you to actually utilize it for the experimentation table, and also you could use it to get dyes for like the Slayers and for other similar things that you could use an RNG meter on, which was very nice to see. This update also included a few other additions. If you go over to the Dwarven Mines, for example, this included the new abandoned quarry area, if I could actually get over there properly. There wasn't really a ton of stuff to do in the abandoned quarry, mind you, but there were some new sea creatures that you could catch that would give you a decent amount of mithril powder. That was going to be like the way that you grinded out mithril powder for a little while, so that was fairly notable. There was also a major buff to Habanero Tactics during this time. If you go to Habanero Tactics on the Bazaar, you can see that it gives you a lot more damage with your Slayer weapons, and also gives you bonus combat wisdom with your Slayer weapons. So it was definitely a very nice buff to this ultimate enchant, as well it also made it so that you gain Magic Find on your Slayer weapons. Just a very strong improvement here, which was super nice to see. For me personally, the eighth biggest update this year was probably Year of the Seal. It wasn't really that big of a deal on its face. It was a relatively small event, but it also brought back the Year of the Pig event, which was previously the Technoblade event, so at least that was able to come back in some way, shape, or form. It also included a bunch of benefits related to the Crystal Hollows, basically making it so that Nucleus runs were a little bit easier to do. Stuff in the Year of the Seal wasn't too crazy. We're eventually going to get a seal pet in a future update, so that didn't even drop with this. But I did want to bring it up here. I felt like it was kind of notable for creating this new cycle of yearly events, which eventually should be filled out. But hopefully, that'll be filled out in the relatively near future and not in like 3 years' time. The seventh biggest update this year, in my view, is definitely Tarantula Tier 5. It wasn't really the biggest thing in the world, but it did have a bunch of additions, which I do want to note here. Some of the biggest additions include the Primordial, which is the new belt, which makes it so when you kill a Slayer boss or Slayer mini-boss, you have a 10% chance to cocoon them, which means that they'll spawn again, and that's something notable. There's also a brand new Reforge that you can apply to belts to give you a 2.5% chance to cocoon pretty much anything, but cocooning has been broken for a little while now. There were also a few other additions that were pretty notable here. The Primordial Armor is something as well that I wanted to bring up, just an upgrade to the Tarantula set, and it's actually fairly solid, although it is very expensive. There's also the addition of the Sting, which is the new high-end spider sword, which as you can see costs 275 million coins, which is extremely expensive, as you can see, so definitely something to keep in mind there. And this is the Bloodshot Reforge that I was talking about with the belt. It's going to cost Shriveled Wasp, which is an RNG drop from the boss. Definitely a notable update. This also included a bunch of damage reduction changes to a lot of areas of the game, and also a bunch of other smaller improvements. But this update had a lot of issues at release. There were some major bugs, there was a lot of frustration with the boss, and even recently it's still looked at one of the worst, updates of this year. Personally, I enjoyed it, but I understand why a lot of people definitely did not. Next up, so number 6 on my list, in my view, is going to be the Iron Man W's update and the ability for a player to de-iron, which I think is fairly notable. This is definitely a pretty major improvement to the Iron Man game mode, because if you're really struggling and you're not really enjoying yourself, you will have the ability to get off of Iron Man, which is nice to see. This also included a ton of other improvements to the game mode, notably giving you access to an Iron Man Shen's auction, as well as some huge buffs to mithril powder rates, which were pretty low for a long time. There was also another aspect of this update that I'm actually going to include separately later on, just because of how big it was, but this was a major update. It also included the /pity system, which basically made it so, for example, if you are struggling to get divine chocolate rabbits through Hoppity's Hunt, you will be able to after you open up 2,500 chocolate eggs. Same thing for mythics, and many other aspects of the game have been put into this pity system, which is super cool and nice to see. Also, another thing to note is that the Iron Man W's update included a ton of NPC sell price changes, making things a lot better for Iron Man players. I definitely feel like they could have gone further with this update, which is probably why I'm not putting it at like 3rd or 2nd place, but it was a step in the right direction. I think a lot of people are fairly happy with it. Next up at number 5, it's the first island on the list, and it's the Backwater Bayou. Normally I would have put something like this way higher, but there were a lot of major updates that I want to go over later that I think had more impact on the game as a whole. The Backwater Bayou included 14 new sea creatures, the new hotspot system, which you can see over there. Basically, these are just little circles where if you throw your fishing rod in, you get a small buff. They're pretty nice and they're pretty notable. This also included a huge revamp to how fishing and fishing rods work, notably including the rod mechanic as well as the rod parts system. This basically is a system of hooks, lines, and sinkers that you can apply to your fishing rods to get huge benefits. It's definitely a more modular system, something that the team is going to be able to expand upon a whole lot easier, and it basically has revamped the fishing skill to make it much easier to improve upon in the future. This also included a revamp to the beginning fishing area in the hub, as well as the beginning fishing quest line. There's also the ship with the ship navigator. Obviously, there's only the bayou for now, but their goal is for at least 2 more islands to be added in the near future, the Lotus Atoll and the Guardian Slayer Island, which is nice to see. There's also the system of your ship hull, engine, and helm, which aren't too major by themselves, but they do give you some additional fishing wisdom, which is cool if you like fishing wisdom. Hotspots are also visible pretty much anywhere you can catch sea creatures, so as you can see, there are in fact hotspots in the Crimson Isle, which are nice to see. And if you check your sea creature guide, you're able to sort through it a lot more than you were able to before, which is really, really nice. There's also some high level sea creatures that were added as part of this update, specifically for lava fishing, as you can see Ragnarok, a bunch of new additions related to fishing as a whole. In my view, the fourth biggest update this year is the one that is most recent, the Mythological Ritual V2 event. This included a bunch of improvements and changes to the Mythological Ritual. Some of the biggest include the fact that you're able to upgrade the Ancestral Spade, giving it a higher maximum burrow chain length, and allowing you to get new rare drops, including the Mythos Fragments. These fragments can then be used for a whole lot of purposes. Notably, you are actually able to get an upgraded Mythic Griffin pet, giving you additional tracking on Griffin burrows, in which tracking is a new stat that allows you to get elusive mobs, and new types of mobs from those Griffin burrows. On top of this, there's a ton of other changes and improvements, notably made to make the player have a better time. As well, you're able to actually get a full set of Mythos armor. This armor specifically is built around the Mythological Ritual event. There's also some new rare drops, including the Golden Fleece, which is really nice to have, and tracking is the new stat that I briefly mentioned, giving you an increased ability to find elusive mobs. There's also a few other changes to note. Notably, if you go to the Dungeon Hub, you're able to actually see that Kudra is in the Dungeon Hub now. There's also a brand new version of Croesus called Vesuvius for Kudra, but for now you can just go to the Dungeon Hub and see both the Catacombs and Kudra in Croesus. If you warp over to Kudra, you're able to see Vesuvius, another new NPC built specifically for Kudra. I know that may have been a little bit confusing, but regardless, these are some nice improvements, and I think they are relatively major. My pick for the third biggest update this year is the thing that I talked about earlier that I split off of a previous update, which is the Dungeon Breaker. The reason why I split off this section is because the Dungeon Breaker was initially pitched by itself. It wasn't pitched as part of Iron Man W's or anything related to that. But the Dungeon Breaker is basically a pickaxe that you can take into the catacombs to perform what was previously the Stonking Bug legitimately. This is a new addition relatively recently, and I think it works extremely well for allowing players on modern versions to perform stonking without really any issues. This was the last thing keeping people on 1.8 in a lot of ways, which is why it gets such a high ranking on my list. I totally understand if people are like, this is not by itself that big of a deal, but in my view, for getting the server over to 1.21 fully, this was a big step that was absolutely necessary. In my view, the second and first biggest updates this year both come from the same release, which is the Foraging update. The second place, in my view, goes to Hunting. Hunting is a brand new skill associated with the Foraging update in which you hunt various monsters to earn hunting XP, but also to claim their shards. Shards basically are the essence of monsters, and by harnessing their shards, you are able to get a bunch of buffs for pretty much every aspect of the game. In order to hunt a mob, you have to use hunting tools, or just kill them while you're having assault applied. There's basically a huge amount of these in the game, 180 in total, and there's also a built-in fusion system, so if you wanted to only hunt one or two specific types of mobs, you could then combine those two shards together to get brand new types. The idea here is very simple. Create a super repeatable, fun, enjoyable experience through players interacting with the environment and interacting with the mobs that they normally are just killing for whatever reason. I personally really like the hunting system, and I think it's a great replacement to the old attribute system that we had a few years back, especially when it comes down to how you would obtain those attributes. The system, in my view, is a lot more expandable in the future. It's already been expanded upon a few times now. Definitely excited to see it continue to expand in the future. The Foraging update, in my view, is the biggest update that Skyblock has received this year, and it's not even really close. Not only did we get many of the additions related to hunting, but we also got a totally new progression for the foraging island called Galatea, as well as a brand new stat in the form of Sweep, allowing you to chop down multiple logs at once. This is not all we got though, we also got the addition of God Temples, Beacons, the Jade Dragon, and a ton of creatures all around the island to interact with. The update is extremely major, and it's not as grindy as many other Skyblock updates in the past have been. Personally, I highly recommend it if you've been coming back to Skyblock every once in a while, or if you haven't really been keeping up with the game. It's definitely an enjoyable 20 to 30 hour experience at the least. I also think this update is probably the most major because of what it means for the game in the future. It is an update built in 1.21, the first update, in fact, to be in the latest version of Minecraft. Hopefully, it's something that could be expanded upon in the future. On top of that, the park was fully revamped alongside this update, including a brand new questline, which I actually think is pretty alright. I would love to hear what you guys think the biggest update this year was, but I think for me, it was absolutely foraging. Overall, 2025 was definitely a big year for Skyblock, including a ton of reworks, new additions, new pieces of content, and new islands, and with the greenhouse apparently coming later this year, there is still more to come. I personally think Greenhouse is going to be a relatively big update, might end up being number 3 or number 4 on this list if it were out right now, but we'll have to wait and see. 2026 seems to be focused on new combat content, which is definitely very exciting to me. I would love to hear what you guys think about this list. Do you think I misplaced any of them? I feel like stuff in the lower tiers like 7 to 10 could easily be swapped around depending on your preference, so please let me know. At the end of the day though, my name's Derailious, thank you so much for watching this video till the end, and look to the future fellas, I'll see you then.